So the title today is The New Essentials of Project Management, Move Faster. And I want to begin, I think, by saying that project management is project management is project management. And that's important to remember. And what I mean by that is it's always about blocking and tackling. And so we have to do all of the things that we know we should do. So we have to be competent schedulers, and we have to write good letters and all those types of things. And so the focus today really will not be on those kinds of things, but instead will be on what does it mean to move faster, and what are some things that we should be adding to our quiver so that we can do a better job. So we're going to talk about some new essentials. So the description is about work and about where we're at in our industry. And so everyone who's listening today understands that, of course, we're way out of the recession now. Work has picked up across the country, and we're all getting busier. Now, one of the things, of course, that happened during the recession is we tended to really watch overhead, which we should always do, but that meant not putting as many people on, perhaps not having as many project administrators, so those types of things. And so all of those things, of course, have implications. And so the question is, right now, what can we do? What should we be doing? Where are we behind? How do we get ahead? And how do we manage all of this work? So it's a good problem to have lots of work. And if you're sitting there thinking, well, we don't have all that much work, or we don't have a terrible backlog, you need to know that the construction industry is strong, and if it's not strong where you're at, it will become stronger sometime very soon. And so the economy is definitely taking an uptick, and so you'll be loaded. Now, we have never done a particularly good job in our industry at being efficient at project management, and so I want to talk about some of those things today, and some opportunities for all of us to become more productive. So some key questions for and about project managers. I'm sure we have all sorts of folks out there listening today, and so project managers and operations managers and presidents and vice presidents and superintendents and so forth. But so some quick questions about project management. One is, what's the right workload for a PM? And so it seems like it's a difficult question to answer, but it's really not. We know historically project managers tend to be overloaded. I'm an owner, and I have a nasty habit of bringing more work in and giving it to my highly skilled project managers and just loading them up because I like opportunity, and my talented project managers like opportunity, but there's a balance we have to find. And so how much work should we manage? And so one action item I think everybody should have who's listening to this is, what's the right workload? Many project managers are managing 10, 12 projects at a time or more, but then the size of the project matters. And so if we're managing one big hospital project, $7 million hospital project, then a project manager can handle that. If we're doing special projects, small projects, $10,000, $50,000, then clearly we can manage fewer. The best way to get around this is to actually look at in your company and say, okay, what is the typical volume for a project manager? What's the profitability per project over the course of the year, and actually do that measurement. We have some ideas on that in service and special projects. We are confident that we shouldn't be having a project manager manage more than $1 million a year, and for larger projects, $3 to $5 million. Now, that to many of you that might sound low, but it's all about profitability. And so many companies run light on project managers and project coordinators, and we'll talk more about that later. So the second question is, how should a project manager manage their time effectively? We know that in the field, typical 8-hour day, we get about 4.5 hours of productivity out of the average field guy. I know as an owner, and we know in management, that we only really get about half of that productivity from project managers. And so how can we get you who are listening as project managers to be able to use your time more effectively? Now, mind you, I'm not saying that it's not for lack of trying or desire or passion or intelligence or any of those things. It's about the industry and how we let it manage us. Third one, which ties into time management, is, how does a project manager move away from firefighting and towards fire prevention? And so how can we find ways to spend more time on pre-planning and optimizing field labor production? And that's the key. Too often as project managers, we spend an awful lot of time on things that really don't make a difference from a labor productivity standpoint. And we have to move away from those things and towards the things that will allow us to maximize our efficiency and therefore the productivity on the jobs. Next question is, what should the #1 focal point be for a project manager? And I think everybody knows the answer here. I hope everybody knows the answer. The answer is labor, 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 labor. And so how can we focus on labor every day? And if you're honest with yourself, I'm sure that you will admit that there's many days when actually focusing on field labor productivity doesn't even come into your opportunity to manage, let alone your action. Next question to consider is, how can project managers help to increase productivity on their projects? And there's lots of different ways that we can do that, some newer ways that we can do that, and we'll talk about that as this webinar goes on. Next, what do project managers need to do every day to keep their job at full speed and productivity? So we'll dig into that as we go on. Next, how can project managers help to increase productivity? And then finally, what technology should a project manager be using to move faster? And so those are some of the ideas and topics we're going to talk about. None of those questions seem particularly new, and so the questions aren't new. The answers are, hopefully, will be what's new. So the first thing I think that we need to do faster is we have to have, and this is one of my unfortunately most favorite sayings, we have to stop having $100,000 a year project managers acting as secretaries and project administrators. And so some of you, don't get hung up on the number. Some of you might be thinking, well, I make more than that or I make less than that. That's not really the point. The point is we have high-dollar personnel who many, many days, including those of you listening, who many, many days don't do anything but write emails, answer emails, work on submittals, work on buyout, work on all the normal project coordination and administrative types of things. And as harsh as it sounds, that doesn't really add value. That's the baseline. Those things have to get done. Now, we're in an industry that has always been known as being penny wise and pound foolish. And so the quote on your screen there is, well, we can't afford a project administrator. We have project managers, or we have one secretary or one administrator for 6 PMs or 7 PMs or even 3 PMs, and we can't really afford somebody like that. Or we have someone like that, and he or she's that's the secretary, and we pay them $25,000 or $30,000 a year. Those are our project administrators, and I couldn't disagree more. We have to shift the project manager from being the secretary and paper pusher to truly being a business analyst, a project business analyst. So in order to do that, one of the things we have to do is we need to hire, train, and raise up our project coordinators and project administrators. And so an action item for everybody to consider out there on the webinar is, do you have enough project administrator / coordinator type people in your company? And if so, how have you trained them? What are their standard operating procedures? Are they truly value-added employees who take initiative and know what to do, or are they, for lack of a better word, secretaries who wait for the project manager to tell them what to do? And again, it's not talking about them as individuals or their value as human beings or individuals. It's about how you manage them. So do they move some of the paper, or do they walk into the door every day and say, okay, this is my standard process flow, these are the things I need to do on the project, and to do all of that without the project manager telling them. And so that's a key difference in supervising project administrators and coordinators. And so there's no doubt in my mind as an industry that we have huge deficits in this area. So how I label that is incompetence at training and delegating in project administrators and coordinators. And so something each of you should think about in your companies. I'm a firm believer that this should be a PHCC certification program for project administrators that says, okay, this is how you raise one, this is how you grow one, here's the skills, and then some sort of certification program where they actually can demonstrate that they have those skills and then take pride in that. I think that would allow us as project managers to micromanage less and increase our expectations. Second thing under that bullet on incompetence is PMs who don't know how they add value, and we'll talk a lot more about that as we continue on in this webinar. The next item here is relative to the $100,000 a year project manager acting as secretary, is that too often we have ill-defined job descriptions and scope for project managers. And so a really important action item coming out of this webinar would be to go back and say, okay, in my company, whether it's Farmer and Irwin or whoever else is out there listening today, is to sit down and say who does what in our company. And so again, as an industry, we don't do a good job with outlining the scope of work and job descriptions. We kind of just get her done, and historically we've done that. So we need to move towards a more formal definition of what people do, because what we want to do is we want to get rid of overlap. Overlap is inefficiency, and we can't move faster if, in fact, we're being redundant. That gets us, of course, to the next bullet. The next bullet identifies a major problem we have in our companies and in our industry is the extraordinary redundancy in task at firms. And so we've got the estimator who takes a job off, and then the project manager gets the job, and what's the first thing he does? He re-estimates the job, in essence, to create his job budgets. Purchasing agent is getting prices, project managers are getting prices, operations managers, tremendous amount of redundancy over and over and over again. And so that's the the budget takeoff, and then the foreman's doing some takeoff to get materials and things like that. In a manufacturing operation, these inefficiencies would be eliminated. Everybody listening needs to go and read the book The Goal. It's an old book. It's about standardizing processes, but it's a well-written book. And we need to think, how can we get rid of those kinds of redundancies? Many of you have weekly manpower meetings. That's a prime example of redundancies. And so, and some of you might even be offended with me saying that. But once a week, you take all these high-dollar managers, you get them in a room to talk about something you should be doing with software. And so you spend an hour in this meeting. You even do it early in the day so that it doesn't distract from your work, but it's still inefficiency. And so you know how many men are in your company. Everybody knows what all project managers want. We all want the best project managers on our projects. I'm sorry, the best field personnel on our projects. And so we argue about whether Johnny should be on this job or that job. That's absurd. There should be a coordinator. There should be simple software that manages this, and you shouldn't have 4 or 5 or 10 guys in a meeting spending $50 an hour to talk about whether Johnny should be on this job or that. That's just dumb. Again, an example of how not to move faster. What would you do with that time each week instead of having that manpower meeting? So another action item would be to identify what other kinds of redundant time wasters do you have in your companies that you could eliminate, because at the end of the day, moving faster as a project manager is all about figuring out how to recapture time. So we'll talk more about meetings and things as we go. Another important bullet on this item of project managers as secretaries is the utter failure as an industry in genuinely tracking labor productivity in real time. The way a project manager adds value, period, is by doing all of the little things that will increase field labor productivity. But of course that becomes somewhat moot if we aren't actually tracking labor productivity in real time. And so if we're still doing weekly time cards, if we aren't capturing productivity is equal to quantity of material installed over time, then you're not doing anything to manage labor productivity in real time. Then what you're doing is you're just counting and keeping score, and I don't need a project manager for that. I can do that in accounting or with a bookkeeper. All right, so a preliminary pass at some simple ways to improve your project management efficiency. One, don't micromanage. We haven't talked about this yet, but an awful lot of project managers out there are micromanagers. Awful lot of business owners out there are micromanagers. Micromanagement comes from not understanding your scope of work, by not delegating properly, by not training people properly to do the things that you've delegated to them, and also by a fear of loss of control. And so you have to drive out all of those things in your company. You need to train people. You need to have clear explanations of what the scope of work is. Then you need to delegate and expect people to perform. Now, some of you are sitting there thinking, well, that's the problem. I expect people to perform, and then they don't. Well, that's your problem as the manager, and you need to fix that problem. The real thing that drives this is fear of lack of control. And also, it's like, well, if I'm not micromanaging, maybe I'm not doing anything. You need to have the confidence that what you're doing when you're not micromanaging is what adds value to your company. Second thing, as far as increasing project management efficiency, is keep improving your project management practice. And what I mean by that is how you do your project management task. And we have some examples coming up of what that looks like a little further on in the webinar. The third thing is ongoing planning. Now, Many of you have heard me talk before. This is not the introduction or the essentials of project management class, although this is subsequent to that. And you know that pre-construction planning is where it's all at. $1 in pre-construction planning equals $4 to $6 in additional profitability per job. Well, on number 3 here, when I talk about ongoing planning, pre-construction planning and pre-planning needs to happen every day. The problem is we're usually so busy putting out fires and reacting that we aren't blocking out time as a project manager to do pre-planning every day. And so we'll talk more about calendars and those kinds of things in a bit. The 4th thing is to work with a sense of urgency. And it's really important to me here that people don't misunderstand this. Urgency doesn't mean running around like a chicken with your head cut off, and it doesn't mean firefighting. What it means is recognizing that time is not on your side, that not all things are equally important, and that learning to prevent fires instead of fighting fires is a much more important skill. When I say time isn't on your side, every project that we build, everyone knows, is time-based. Yet, and how this should inform us is to not waste our time. Yet, we're all human, and we all know that we're working on a task, we're working on a task, working on a task, and you're working on some task that you work on for 3 days. Now, what I want you to do is step back and say, did this task deserve 3 days worth of work? So the way to get out of that is to really start to use calendar and time management skills more. And so before you start on a task, before you start on estimating a change order, before you start on a contract review, before you start on thinking about writing letters, how long should this take me to do? Budget that time and then execute. And what you'll find out is you'll find there's lots of little micro insults to your time that you give up, that then waste your time. And so I want you to think about being more urgent and deciding, okay, this is what really matters, and this is what I'm going to get done today, this week, this month. The 5th thing relative to improving your project management efficiency is really practicing transparency and open communication. Oh my goodness, we are terrible at that, about this as an industry. We are not transparent with numbers. We're not transparent with information. We're not transparent with communication. We typically tend to communicate in very much a happenstance way of communicating. And so we'll have meetings and we'll talk about things, but then other things will come up and, oh yeah, I remember that, or you pick up the phone or you send an email, those kinds of things. How do I know this? Well, the number one way I have of knowing this is I do a lot of foreman and superintendent training for PHCC all over the country, as well as project management and owner training, all kinds of things. But when I do foreman and superintendent training, one of the first questions that I ask all of the guys who were there in the training is to introduce themselves, tell me their position and their foreman, and what job they're on. They can tell me that. And then the next question I'll ask them is twofold. One is, how big is the job you're working on right now? And 2, how's it doing? And by how big, the metric that I use is how many hours are there on this job. That's how big the job was, because we're talking about hours. I care less about dollars, total contract dollars, than I do hours. And then on the how are we doing, what I expect to hear is about profit percentages relative to the magic formula. Productivity is equal to quantity over time. And so if a guy tells me, well, I don't know, that's the project manager's job, that's a classic example of the foreman doesn't know what it is that he's managing, and then all he's doing is managing guys running instead of actually helping you to do your job. So an action item for all of you coming out of this webinar, tomorrow go and ask, just randomly, pick one of your field foremen and say, hey, how big is this job, and how are we doing on this job? And when they say, well, we're doing pretty good, then you know that you haven't done your job as project manager. The question is, how does becoming more transparent and being more open with your communication make you more efficient as the project manager? Well, the answer is, I think is obvious, is that if your field managers, the people who manage below you, actually know what the measurable, tangible goal is, and they have feedback on how they're doing against the goal, they're much more likely to be partners with you in achieving that goal instead of being your field, I don't want to say servant, but the field executor instead of a field manager. Number 6 on improving your efficiency is to never lose sight of the 3 factors: time, budget, and quality. Obviously, Those are the drivers as project manager. Probably the most obvious thing that you focus on is quality of those three. Budget kind of just happens, and you make the profit that you want to or you don't, and then time is the one that's most rigid. I want you to think about all three of those things in balance. All right, another example of ways to increase our efficiency is to use templates for everyone. I just finished a class, a short project management class, a couple of days with a company, and every time something came up, essentially they were reinventing the wheel. And so I said, okay, let's write a letter responding to this problem on this job. And so 20 project managers in a room sat down, wrote the letter. Ask yourselves in your companies, okay, go from project manager to project manager to project manager and say, okay, this came up, respond to it. If you have 20 project managers, you'd have 20 different letters. That's just nuts. We need to standardize everything. Almost every incident that you have on a daily basis can be responded with a standard response. Now, that's not impersonal. That doesn't make the client feel like you don't care about them. That's about you becoming much more efficient. And so another action item coming out of this webinar would be to say, okay, let's start right now. The next letter that you write, identify what the issue is. Maybe it's a schedule issue. Maybe it's a conflict issue. Maybe it's a release of submittals, approval of submittals issue, whatever it is. And say, how can I create a standard letter for our company so that I never have to write this letter again? And it's not that complicated. I'll give you an example here on the next slide. And so I say, stop reinventing the wheel. All of us report on monthly progress of projects to somebody else in the company, whether it's operations manager, president, vice president, or whatever, and we come in and we yak. And we talk about things. And so, yes, we should, in fact, pull up the numbers and talk about those things. But how about we just have an agenda and you as my project manager come in with a template that looks something like what's on the screen now. And so Roman numeral 1 there says accomplishments for the month of January or the appropriate month. And so the first item is describe the most important accomplishments, relate that to the project's Gantt chart, describe other important accomplishments that happened this month, one bullet for each, and if any other issue needs to be resolved from previous, it has been resolved, then from the previous month, then list them as accomplishments. Next one, plans for the next month. So describe the most important items to be accomplished in the next month. Again, relating them to the project Gantt chart. So you go through, okay, here's what's going to happen next month, and on you go. Number 3 is issues. Briefly list important issues that have surfaced or are still important. And so are there surprises? List all of the issues. And then finally, project changes. And so list all of those things. And so you go into the meeting. You go into the meeting with everything organized so that you don't have to be redundant in the meeting. So the next thing relative to becoming more efficient is a slide I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but every project manager needs to spend time on it. So if you've been in a time management session with me somewhere across the country, you know that there's 4 ways that we spend our time as managers. Doing urgent and important things, which is firefighting, doing important, not urgent things, and so that's quality time, that's plenty time, doing neither urgent nor important things, that's wasting time, and urgent but not important, and that's other people's problems. And so truly, if we want to move faster, you need to stop spending your time in urgent in quadrants 1, 3, and 4. 80% of your day should be in quadrant 2, and it should be minimized everywhere else. Right now, for most of you, you spend 75 to 95% of your day in quadrants 1, 3, and 4, and only a little bit of time in quadrant 2. And that's, if you want to move faster, the biggest thing you can do is move to that quadrant 2, which is in fact pre-planning. All right, the next thing, if we're going to talk about becoming more efficient and moving faster, is stop seeing yourself as what I call a heroic manager. Many foremen, many project managers take a lot of satisfaction in being able to solve problems. Well, I'm not interested in Superman in my company, nor am I interested in specialists. A specialist is a very deep person, and so deep in technological ability and solutions. I want my project managers to have technological capabilities. They need to know systems and buildings and construction, obviously. But too often specialists are kind of like engineers in that they know all of the detail, but they're not good at communicating and therefore not good at working with larger groups. Now, generalists are the exact opposite. They're really good with people. They can go to a meeting and talk with everyone, but then they're light on details. And so if we're going to be the optimal new project manager, then we need to be this versatile person that is both broad and deep. So the question is, and really that's what it's really about, is what are you going to do after this webinar instead of just entertainment, is to go back and ask yourself, how can I become more versatile as a project manager? If you're really good on the generalist side, you can move the paper, you understand contracts, you work with people well in meetings and things like that. But technically, you over-rely on your field technicians or your field guys or engineers or whatever. Where are you at as far as being the most versatile project manager, or vice versa? If you're a very technical project manager, how can you become better at these other skills? If we're going to talk about being more efficient and moving faster, one of the things we have to talk about is increasing field labor productivity. And that came up repeatedly earlier when I was talking about it. And this gets back to those standardized tools. And so one of the things that surprises me is what's on your screen now is an example of a simple Excel spreadsheet to plan our delivery of materials, equipment, etc. onto job sites. One of the things that frustrates field guys more than anything else is project managers not getting them things to the job site when they need them. Typically, when project managers order things, when we think about pre-planning, the question we have and we talk about is, what's the lead time on that? Now, what's unsaid in that and unspoken is, okay, we need to know the lead time so we can get things here on time. We need to completely change the conversation. In your pre-planning, when you're talking with your foreman, we need to say, what date does this material or equipment need to be installed, period. That's the only date that the field should care about. That's the only date that matters. And so let's say we list the date. And so in this example, the date is August 4th of this year. Right? So August, my gosh, I'm a project manager. I'm thinking right now, August, man, that's a long way away. This is February. We're talking, that's 6 months away. I don't have a time pressure. Remember I said time, budget, and quality. I don't have a time pressure to worry about this thing I need to order. In fact, I can focus on some other things, and I'll get back to this. When you look at all of the steps below that have to happen in order for us to get this thing here, we've got to do our buyout. We've got to write our purchase order. The purchase order has to be accepted by who we send it to. We have to request and receive submittals. Then we have to review the submittals internally. We've got to submit then the submittals to the engineer. The engineer has to review them. They may have to be resubmitted. Then finally, once they're approved, we're going to release the materials for fabrication. It's got to get into the manufacturer queue. Then it's got to be manufactured, and that's where the 12-week lead time is. Then it's got to get shipped to the job site and received on the job. You want to move faster? Get stuff to your guys in the field just in time. Don't get it there early, don't get it there late. And that's an obvious project management item, but most of us don't use the project management tool of a simple schedule. So what this simple spreadsheet will allow you to do is say, okay, what date does it need to be here? And then how long will each of these things take? So a week and a half for buyout, a day or a day and a half to write the purchase order, a week for the engineer to review it, and so forth. And suddenly we find that something that has to be delivered in August, my last day as a project manager to make the decision to purchase this is March 7th, which is, if today is in fact February 25th, that means I have 10 days to make the decision. And that changes things. It makes it more urgent. And so I think you should be using tools like this to move faster. Let's look now at why projects fail and figure out how to focus on things that matter. So number one is lack of user inputs. That's communication. That's the transparency I was talking about earlier. Number two is incomplete requirements of specifications. That's bad documents. Bad documents and review of documents is solved by reviewing them earlier and having more formalized processes. Changing requirements and specifications. Well, that happens on the job site. That's called customer control. And so if I want to move faster as a project manager, I need to be able to control my customer better. That's usually by asking better questions, by doing better documentation, and by making sure that people understand, the customer understands, what the cost is to not doing it like you're in contract with. Another cause, another reason projects fail is lack of executive support, both in your company and also at the customer level. Fifth one is technology incompetence. We'll talk more about technology here in just a minute, but we don't use technology as well as we need to in our industry, and we need to get with the program. Number 6 is lack of resources. We just don't have enough guys. Now, this isn't to give ourselves an excuse we don't have enough field guys. No, what I'm really talking about is part of the project manager's responsibility is to help build capacity in the company. And so that means a big part of your job is to help your company grow and help the human resources grow and to continuously be recruiting. All right, the rest of the items on the list all are important. I'm not going to spend as much time on this. So unrealistic expectations, unclear objectives, unrealistic timeframes, all of these go to communication and scheduling. And then new technology, and what that is having a new technology but then not being able to use it effectively. All right, so if a project manager's job is to drive positive change in the organization, and it is, and the question is what obstacles do you have in doing that? Well, one obstacle is field employees might dismiss ideas from you, a desk jockey, who doesn't know what we're facing out here on the job each day. Field employees feel they have no motivation to change because they can't see the direct impact on how that change is going to make their life easier. The classic scenarios, well, we've got the technology, but the guys in the field won't use it. Well, two things. One, that's not true. Two, if it seems to be true to you, then you need to take an approach of don't just buy the technology, do the training. When people then try and fail, retrain, and then when they fail after that, they haven't really failed because they have the skills. They failed because they've chosen not to do it, and then you have an issue you have to address. Next is younger managers might have, meaning some of you, might have issues with exerting authority over older subordinates. And this is an age-old problem, and what you have to do is, the way that you do that is by being efficient, by being professional, and by being a good communicator. And so understanding that we have now 5 generations in the workforce, and this is bound to come up. And so how are you going to deal with that guy? One of the things you should put as a warning bell for you is if you say something like this, you'll know that you are the problem and not them. So especially when we talk about technology, one of the things I hear from younger managers is, well, yeah, we've got tablets out there, we've got iPads out there, but old George, and he's 60 years old, he won't use the technology. That's just not true. George uses technology every day. George has a smartphone. The problem is you haven't taught George how to use it, how to make it valuable to him, and that's part of your job. Why are we talking about technology? Technology is going to help you move faster. Another problem is business owners might not be willing to make a big financial investment or what they see as a big financial investment in the new tool or technology. Your job as a manager is to show them how not making this investment will in fact cost you money. And finally, business owners might resist implementing changes to procedures that have worked, quote, just fine for years. Many of you have multitudes of procedures, and the reason that you do them the way you do now at your company is because it's always been done that way before. Your job is to blow that whole thing up. So let me show you a real brief video in rethinking your project management technology, and I want to ask you if this is how you're documenting your projects.
In 2003, Multivista emerged as the global leader in construction photo documentation. If you own, build, or have a vested interest in construction projects, Multivista should be there to document every aspect of the project lifecycle. See us in action.
Sure, just zoom in. Way in. It's an inspection grade photo. Read me the date off the copper pipe. That's what I thought. Crisis averted.
So, you helped with this build?
Yep, heck of a project. Aren't they all, though? Well, you know the drill.
Right. So here's the issue. We got a network and IT upgrade coming up. And since I wasn't here for the build, I don't know how they ran the cabling in there.
It's hooked up like this.
Oh.
Samson here. No problem. I'm texting him the login for Multivista. He can pull up floor 2, hotspot 42 from last Thursday to see progress. Gotta run. We're working with this new client building a housing development out here, and he's keeping a real close eye on his investment.
Sure.
Loves Malta Vista, but can't keep track of his password. So, what do you think?
What do I think about having this X-ray view? I'm impressed. Didn't realize Malta Vista was so, precise. Glad I checked before we started tearing up walls and shutting the hospital down wing by wing.
Well, I'll gladly accept the $1 million you almost spent on that as a convenience fee.
I'll see what I can do. Hey, while you're here, the outlet in my office isn't working.
I'm on it.
Malta Vista, the leader in construction photo documentation for better built projects.
So I showed you that not because not because I'm trying to sell software. I showed you that because I want you to think about how it is that you're managing projects. And so there's all kinds of tools out there, and that's just one of them. And we're reinventing the wheel. So when you look at that, that's an integration of drawings, integration of documents, integration of photographs. And so you should be asking yourself, what am I not doing like that? So think about this. You're looking at your drawing, you're looking at a photograph of what got built yesterday, now you're answering questions. I think that's a game changer. And so, again, it's not about Multivista. Multivista is just one company. But what it is about merging architectural drawings, digital photography, and your project progress. So I'm going to talk about, like I say, called technology now. And so I'm not going to go into any detail of these because to me these are old news. These things are old news. And so if this is you, if you're not doing these things right now, then you are behind. And so here are the bullets. 1, iPads or tablets for all foremen and service techs, period. No excuses, no deferring, saying, well, it's too expensive. An iPad or tablet you can get for $400. And so these are this is free money, and so you really need to go ahead and make this investment as soon as possible. And so if you're not already doing that, then you are woefully behind. I say no laptops, no smartphones, because that's the next thing I hear is, well, we went ahead and bought all of our foreman smartphones. You realize you're talking about guys from 18 to 60, many of them big old gnarled hands, and they're out on the job site and they're trying to look at a PDF or work Bluebeam on a frickin' smartphone. Makes no sense at all. Laptops aren't necessary for what we do, and so a simple iPad or simple tablet gets it done. You should be doing that now. Electronic field layout. I've done lots of classes on this. I'm tired of talking about it, so I'm not going to talk about it today. If you're not laying out your projects electronically, you are behind the curve, and what will happen is before too long you'll see contractors who won't allow you onto the job site unless you can do that. We're already starting to see that now. The third thing is electronic scanning. Again, I've taught a lot about this, and so I'm not going to talk about it today, but if you want to move faster, you will not have guys out there field measuring things. You're going to go ahead and do electronic scanning, spend the $40,000, buy the equipment, learn how to use it, and then this will help you with your as-built, your field measurement, your accuracy, your customer satisfaction, all those kinds of things. Another technology that you should already be using to make you more efficient is cloud sharing of all documents right now. So where everyone on the project communicates instantly while looking at the document. So you're not sending an email, referring to a print, writing an RFI, and then responding, blah, blah, blah. All of those things are inefficient. If you think about your day and how many emails that you send and receive a day, and if you could eliminate 50% of them, think about how much time that would give you and how much more that would make you efficient. Cloud sharing does that. Now, some of you say, well, on some projects we do, the general has cloud sharing and all that, blah, blah, blah. I'm talking about you and your company. I'm talking about you and your guys. And so it's about critical mass. And so start with you and your guys and your projects, and then encourage your customers who aren't using this kind of software to do that, because it's much easier to click on the print. A guy in the field sees a problem. He highlights that on the plan, clicks on that. That automatically sends an email, and now I'm the project manager, the engineer, the general contractor, the field guy are all looking at exactly the same thing, answering the question. This is old news now. And so if you're not there, there's an opportunity for improvement. And then finally is integration of construction with building operations. And so the first video I showed was really about looking at the job, and so looking at it in paper or on a 2D diagram electronically, and then looking at the as-built situation in the building. So I want to show you another clip now that shows where we're going to be with the facilities management, and how you as a project manager will be required to integrate with the customer. So that's the next thing. That's the next thing I want to show. So we're talking about the future of construction, and so I say the future of construction 2015 to 2035. And so we do some work with Mortenson, and one of the construction executives at Mortenson says that essentially the coming together of computer modeling, mobile devices, new building materials has put us at a beginning, modularization of building materials has put at the beginning of a new era. And I couldn't agree with that more. It is a new era indeed. We've entered our next iteration, and the successful contractor and project manager of the present and future will learn to embrace change, prepare for your future by gaining the skills, tools, technology, mindset, and culture required to fully engage. So this is the classic change curve, and I've talked about this before, and so everyone knows, I think, what we're talking about, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. But we start over here with some new technology. People are excited about it. Some win, some lose, but there's not a lot of people doing it. And then there's the early adopters, and then there's a shift from grabbing hold of the new technology to become more efficient and more profitable. And there's that chasm there between when the early adopters are there and then the rest of the industry starts coming. And so unfortunately, most of us are on the far right side of the curve, which is we're late majority conservatives actually going to laggards. And so I would say right now, people, project managers, owners who aren't having their foreman use tablets in the field and using the apps and Bluebeam and PDFs and all those kinds of things for drawings, having all the drawings on the iPad are in fact laggards. And so we know that this is the problem. The successful contractor and project manager of the present and the future will learn about all of these things that are listed here on this screen. And so computer modeling and BIM, and I'm not going to talk a lot about that today, but I am going to talk a little bit about it, because as a project manager you have to gain some proficiency here for all kinds of reasons. One, it's going to be required. Two, it will be right now it's still in the early adopter phase, and so you can demonstrate your company's leadership by doing this. Mobile devices, I'll talk about that a little bit. New buildings, materials, modularization, robotics and automation in construction. And so how will you as the project manager need to be thinking about constantly, how can we do this thing that we do out in the field with a machine instead of a human? And that's not about getting rid of jobs. That's about solving our manpower problems. 3D printing, you can read the rest of the list. I'm not going to read the list, but you can read the list. And all of those things are what will make you a successful contractor and a successful project manager. And I've recently published an article that deals with all this too, and so maybe we can provide you a link with that as well. So I say there's 10 things that we have to do, and so that's how we'll head towards the finish here. Is 10 things that we have to do as project managers in order to be successful. One, all field supervisor personnel and project managers must be using contemporary technology to do their jobs effectively. Use of mobile devices to perform data capture, analysis, communication, coordination tasks is the minimum expectation that's required today. And I can't say that strongly enough. I won't read the rest of what's on there, but this is essentially the 10 commandments of the things that you have to do right now as the project manager. And so many of you have made a lot of inroads down that path, but there's still some that have not. All right, next. Your project planning and execution must be informed by the ability to use data and modeling in an effective way. And so this is a pretty big gap here, is that there is a percentage of project managers who have some competency here, but for the most part, most project managers in our industry are still way behind on this. In fact, we've almost kind of checked off on this as far as project managers, kind of like we check off with safety. And so if we have a safety coordinator, we as project managers don't pay quite as much attention to safety because that's their job. Well, modeling is part of the project manager of the future and part of the moving faster. You've got to be able to model data. You've got to be able to model a job. You don't have to be the super BIM operator. You have to be the super BIM user. The project manager, the efficient project manager, is the one who can manipulate the data, can manipulate the model so that you can accurately and quickly represent your plan for the project, how you and your systems interface with the other building systems, and so forth. So if you're talking about BIM and you're talking about collision detection, then I know that you aren't as proficient as you need to be, and you know it, and so you need to figure out how to get up to speed. So the next slide here is really the progression of BIM, and so this is really where we are at as an industry, and where you need to go. And so 3D BIM is, if you're doing BIM at all right now, 3D BIM is probably where you're at to a degree. But so this is the basic modeling, animations, 3D walkthroughs, those kinds of things. But even that over here on 3D BIM, there's a lot that you aren't doing. And so BIM-driven prefab. And so we should be going from our BIM model immediately to prefab and having our BIM model send the information to prefab. Laser accurate BIM-driven field layout. So I was talking earlier about laser scanners. Well, you can't do laser accurate BIM-driven field layout if you don't have a scanner and you don't have a Trimble. So it's about integrating those kinds of things. So I think even as you all look at the diagram here, you probably would say, you know, I'm not really there as a project manager yet. We get into the next level, and that's 4D, and that's really talking about scheduling. So as the very least, as a project manager, I had to know what 3D, 4D, 5D, 6D, and 7D is. So 4D is about project scheduling and phasing, lean scheduling, becoming more just in time as a project manager, doing simulations of installation, and so the order, the duration, those kinds of things. And then look at the last bullet there, visual validation for payment approval. I promise you in the very near future as a project manager that you will be able to stop the game of creating the front-loaded schedule values and then the overbilled percent complete. And of course I know that terrifies many owners. But your customers very quickly in the near future are going to be saying, okay, don't worry about sending that payment approval because we've got a BIM model that shows what's done and the total value of the contract, and we're going to pay you off of that. That is the future. That actually makes you more efficient as the project manager because all of those machinations that you spend, all the time you spend every month going through this whole rain dance of figuring out how much you can get overbilled and then getting things rejected and all that, that's a waste of time. It doesn't help to increase your cash flow. It doesn't help to increase your field labor productivity, yet it feels like a project management job and skill. Well, it's not. The good news is it's going to go away, so you should take the lead on that. 5D BIM then is estimating, and so it's real-time conceptual estimating and value engineering, playing what-if scenarios, looking at different options for prefab. So this is really where you add a lot of value to your client and where you add a lot of value as a project manager. And so if you have the capability to manipulate a BIM model, now you're in a project management meeting with a customer and something comes up, you need to be able to pull up in real time the model on your laptop, because you do have a laptop, and go ahead and run the model and say, okay, well, if we do this, then this is what changes. Now, of course, that'll integrate back to the schedule, and so there's a whole new level of project management skills that are coming by using BIM as a tool. 6D gets into sustainability, 7D gets into facility management. I don't really have time today to get into those, but that gives you the trajectory of where you'll be going with BIM as a project manager, and that's the important part. Again, as project managers, don't check out thinking that that's the BIM guy. BIM is project management. Next thing you have to do is field layout using electronic layout. And so there's lots of words on there. It's real simple. You're either doing field layout electronically or you're wasting lots of time and having more errors. I promise you, you can reduce your layout time, and all of your guys in the field do layout every day. You can reduce it by 50% and increase your accuracy by close to 100%. If you do this. Also then, of course, will help you in disputes with a customer or with other trades about locations and walls and those kinds of things. The fourth thing you have to do as a project manager is you have to start selling our industry to young people. Now, you know, we talk about manpower shortages and people coming in the trade. Bottom line is young people don't come into the trade because they still see it as as the butt crack plumber kind of industry. Well, everything I've talked about today is about project managers becoming more efficient, and moving faster and the new essentials of project management. Well, if you haven't figured out by now, project management is rapidly becoming a computer game. And I think that's a good thing, and I think that young people will see that as a good thing. And so you learn the skills, you let younger people know what a cool job it is and how it's a computer game. Suddenly some of our problem will go away. Fifth thing we have to do is focus on modularization, and so that's a different webinar for a different day. But modularization is the future of is the present and the future of our industry. There are general contractors and owners across the country that are building huge prefab modularization sites, and you're either going to be the project manager who gets it and figures out how your company fits in, or we'll watch as other people take over that scope of work. The sixth thing is to figure out what parts of your construction activities can be automated. And so you say, well, none. I do a lot of service work, or I'll do a lot of industrial work, or what have you. Think again. Go online, check out YouTube videos. Just start Googling and YouTubing, and you'll see videos of automated bricklaying, automated road building, automated crane operations. And for sure, if you don't think that there will be automation of construction activities for PHCC contractors, you're woefully misinformed. And so the question you should be asking is, as a project manager, what can I think about automating in my company? And so I'll refer you to a DPR video where a project manager in that company, general contractor, decided, hey, this we spend a lot of hours every year doing wall layout because they're general contractors. How can we automate wall layout? It's a classic example of a project manager who decided that they wanted to move faster, and they combined Trimble layout with Roomba, with vacuuming your rooms, your house at night. And so check that video out. Seventh thing is use of drones and other small-scale robotics. So this goes along a little bit with automation, but you go and walk on your job and you do a random survey of the job. Well, we have more and more drones, not just on the site, but also on jobs. And so how will you be doing site surveys of your construction projects using drones? And the answer is people are already doing it. And so do you want to be that guy or that gal who brings that level of technology to your company? The eighth thing is using the software that we have to completely redefine the estimating process. And so I know this is a project management seminar, but estimating and project management go together. And 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we won't have any estimators. We'll only have analysts. All of the takeoff will be done online. Everything will be in a model. And that will, in fact, make your life as a project manager much more efficient. And we actually have the ability to do much of this now. And so do you have the skills right now to do that? Do you even know what exists? And if not, then that's your action item, is go and find out what should we be doing. Are we already doing on-screen takeoff now? But even on-screen takeoff is still relatively rudimentary, and there are other steps that we can take. The next thing that you need to do to move faster is to recognize that all human craft workers will be enabled with machine interfaces to assist in communication, documentation, and optimizing field labor productivity. It's like policemen having body cams. They all will have them now. We're going to have them in construction. So it's GPS, RFID, onboard instrumentation, and so that is coming. Well, now that's here now. And how can I make my job easier as a project manager is with something as simple as as a helmet cam on my foreman. He can walk the job, and I can have conversations with him while he's walking the job, and I could save that 2-hour round trip out to that job and back, and actually capture better information. And then the final thing on the 10 things you must do is to recognize that there's a materials revolution going on. Obviously a full screen here, lots of information, but these are examples of things that are going on in materials in construction, and what is your duty, what is your passion as the project manager to figure out how are materials changing in the plumbing, heating, cooling industry, and how is that going to affect me. So I've got lots of different examples there. Construction in general and how materials are changing, but how will materials change in our industry. And you can think of older examples. And so as much as you might hate PEX and things like that, PEX is an example of a material change that did revolutionize things. ProPress is an example of a materials and methods change that changed things. And so are you as expert as you need to be on materials and methods? And so if you do refrigerant piping, are you doing your refrigerant piping with ProPress? If you're not, then you're spending money that you probably don't need to spend. And so some of you may be horrified by statement by that, but you shouldn't be. It's about materials and methods and staying up to date, and that helps you to move faster. So I say with a conclusion here, we've only got a couple of minutes left, is that construction has entered its next phase. The shift from the tired but comfortable low-margin job shop approach to building building is finally hitting out the pasture. The winners, the project manager winners in the company, project manager winners in the industry, and the company winners in the industry will be those who get it, who get out and embrace the 10 items addressed above and all the things I've talked about today. There's lots more opportunities and technologies to address, a lot more detail that we could go into. But the next step really is you starting down that path. And so the intent today is to whet your appetite about things that you can and should be doing to move faster, to become the new essential project manager. And the only way to do it is to get out there and go. And so that culture of change has to be embraced by you. And the rest, I say, is simply learning. And so all of the things we talked about today, it's just a matter of you going out now and getting the resources and deciding which one or two or three you're going to become better at. Is it standardization of documents? Is it technology? What is it?